We are delighted to welcome you to the first edition series of the 15th Jaipur Literature Festival. It is our pleasure to present today Tell Me How to Be, Neel Patel in conversation with Lilly Singh. Rising literary star Neel Patel's debut novel, Tell Me How to Be, is by turns heartbreaking and warm, both soft and striking, intimate as it is immense. The inaugural pick for Lilly's library, Patel's story is one of reflection, revelation, reconciliation, and choice. That of a mother and her son chasing those elusive questions how and what to be. In conversation with best-selling author, comedian, and actress Lilly Singh, Patel discusses his remarkable debut and the questions and cornerstones of the human condition. That is quite simply being. Neel Patel is the author of the story collection If You See Me, Don't Say Hi, and the novel Tell Me How to Be. His work has appeared in Elle India, the Paris Review, and more. He lives in Los Angeles, where he writes for film and television. Lilly Singh is a multifaceted entertainer, actress, producer, writer, and creator. A leading force in the digital world, she has amassed a global audience of over 38 million followers across her social media channels, where she writes, directs, produces, and stars in comedic and inspirational videos. Singh recently struck a first look deal with Universal Television Alternative Studio with a Unicorn Island Productions banner. Currently, she is developing numerous projects across film and television. This April, Singh will appear in the second season of Hulu's comedy Dollface and appear on the big screen, starring in DreamWorks Animation's action comedy Bad Guys. Please feel free to send in your comments by typing them in the comment section. Do follow our social media handles to get notifications on the upcoming sessions. Please tweet using hashtag Jaipur Literature Festival 2022 and tag at Jaipur Litfest. Ladies and gentlemen, tell me how to be Neel Patel in conversation with Lilly Singh.
Neel, I am so excited to chat with you about all things Tell Me How to Be. Are you as pumped as I am?
I am. Very pumped.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Now, as you may or may not know if you're watching this, Neel's book, Tell Me How to Be, was the very first pick of my new book club, Lilly's Library, because I just loved it that much and I want to dive into the story and the characters and the arcs and all the things. But Neel, let's start with this. The book is strong, it's powerful, it deals with a lot of themes that are emotional. I related to it a lot. I might have cried a few, 200, 300, 100 times. Who did you write this book for? Like when you were writing this book, who did you imagine would pick up this book and be resonating with it?
I think anyone really who felt like I did, which was that I didn't belong, and that who I was wrong and what I wanted was wrong. And but to be honest, I wrote it for myself first. I think I had to write this book. There was so much kind of weighing me down that I didn't even realize. And it wasn't until I started writing through, especially the character Akash's voice, that it sort of brought up all these memories of this way that I felt constantly, like anxious, afraid, guilty about who I was. And I think, that's the enormous power of literature, is that it was so unexpected how many people really connected to the story and saw themselves in it. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for anyone watching this, if you have not finished the book yet, which you should, it should be the top of your to-do list, but it is about a mother and a son who both have secrets. They live in a culture of secrets, a family of secrets. Akash is struggling with his sexuality and coming out to the world and his mom. And Reenu is struggling with the secrecy of her first love and having feelings still for someone else that was not her husband after her husband passes away. And so there's a lot of tea. There's a lot of hot drama that's going on in the book. I have to ask you this, were you scared or nervous about any group of people reading the book? And I ask you this because my mom follows along Lilly's Library, the book club, and she read the entire book and she loved it. But there's some steamy stuff in there, and I was like, I can't believe my mom read this. So were there any groups of people where you're like, I don't know how aunties or uncles or people are gonna react to this?
Yeah, but the funny thing is, like, when I'm writing something, I don't know if you're the same way, but when I'm writing something, I'm not thinking about anything else.
Mm.
I'm just in the story and I'm writing it. And it's when the book is about to come out where I'm like, oh God, people are gonna read this. And now I remember there was a WhatsApp group that my parents had with all
Of
their
course,
friends.
WhatsApp,
Yeah.
WhatsApp coming through.
Yeah, you gotta have the WhatsApp group. And they were reading the description about family secrets. So they were like telling my parents, oh, now we want to know what are all your secrets? Like, we're gonna learn all your. So there's this idea that when you write a book, like, oh, it must be based on real events with real people. So there was that. Like, I was afraid that my mom would think it was Rainey was her, or that her friends would think Rainey was her and start digging into her past. But but I think that's the thing. You can't think of those things when you're writing. You have to just be committed to the art.
Yeah,
And
that
then
is
just
something I feel. Yeah, I feel like that is something that is very difficult for South Asians, at least in my experience. When I'm writing something, I do have to kind of shut out that part of my brain because I have to be like, no, what I'm writing has to be authentic and has to be my vision, and I can't let all these external pressures get to me. However, the one thing I do struggle with, and I'm interesting to hear your point of view here, is when it comes to South Asian culture, let's be real, it is a culture that prioritizes secrets. It's very what will people think. We can't let people know our business. We can't let people know if we need help, if we're scared, if we're in pain. It's about a front a little bit. And I've always struggled with, how do I tell authentic stories without exposing the culture and making it seem like something that's really, really toxic? Because I also feel like I have a duty to represent the culture well. How do you balance that line of like, I want to tell the story, but I want to throw us under the bus?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think it's just about being as real and honest as you can and telling all sides of a story, right? So we see Renu, you can read Renu different ways. You could say, well, she's not a good mother. She put all this on her child. She was like withholding of affection. But it isn't until you see how she experienced the world and what she had to deal with that you realize, okay, well, she had her issues too, and yes, there are certain aspects of our community that, we all kind of like gripe about, the lokya kahenge and everybody being in your business. But there's so much else. There's family, there's community, there's a wonderful, beautiful culture that, binds us all together. And it's really just about telling the whole story.
I love that so much. It's actually one of my favorite things about the book is that you learn different people's perspectives, and it's not just about the obnoxious bratty teenager and the strict mom. You're learning why people are the way they are and how they see the world. And I think that's something we don't do enough in our everyday life. Was that always how you intended to tell the story, through two perspectives, or was it that you started to write one perspective and you thought, I don't know how to handle this?
Yeah, no, actually, it's interesting. The first draft of Tell Me How to Be didn't have Renu at all.
Oh, wow.
It was all Akash's story. It was terrible. I was on a deadline and I was like, oh, let me just like write whatever. And but I think I was also just so consumed with my own experience, right? As a child of immigrants and dealing with racism and homophobia. And then on top of that, my parents who were putting all these expectations onto me. And again, it goes back to like telling a full and whole story. And I think you can probably agree. I think as a generation, I think we tend to villainize our parents. Sometimes we go in a little bit on them for a good reason, but I also think we, again, don't see their side of the story. We don't know what their life was like, before they came to America. We don't know what they regret. What were their dreams? What are the things that they wanted for themselves that they didn't get to have? And it was that kind of inspiration that led me to create, the mother figure, Renu, and to see how characters have a lot more in common than they think.
I love that you said that, because so often, like, it sounds common sense, but so often we think parents don't have dreams or regrets or things like that. Like, we don't actually humanize our parents. You're absolutely correct. So I did feel a little bit like the book slapped me in the face that way, in the best way, because I was like, I don't think I've ever thought about my parents' perspective in a fair way before. So I really learned a lot from it. But I want to dive into Akash for a second, because I find him so fascinating. And ever recall a time when I was rooting for a character as much as I was rooting for Akash. And every time he makes self-sabotaging decisions, I'm screaming at the book, being like, stop, I love you. Do you not know I love you? But he's an aspiring songwriter and musician, right? Talk to me about that choice, because his story and his arc is very tied to the arts. And I want you to just speak to why that was important.
Yeah, it was important because I mean, I'm an artist, you know, you're an artist. Like, it's so hard as a South Asian to pursue a field that your parents and the community doesn't feel is practical. You know, how are you going to make money doing what you're doing? You know, why don't you just go become a doctor or an engineer, because that's what everyone else is doing? And I always thought that was so strange growing up in America. I remember the first time I went to India and I was just overwhelmed with the art. I mean, one of the most artistically rich countries in the world. And then I came home and I thought, why are we all doctors? Like, why aren't we, you know, why aren't we doing that here? You know, and so I knew that that was going to be part of his journey, is sort of coming into his own, not as a queer person, a brown person, but as an artist too. And music is such a big part of my life. And it was kind of the saving grace of my childhood. I knew that I could go home and watch music videos on MTV or BET, or, you know, when I was in college, illegally download music off LimeWire.
It's a safe space, no judging.
Yeah. And, you know, it was, music was kind of the bridge between my life at home and my life at school. And at home, a different language was spoken, you know, different food was eaten, there were different expectations, different culture. And then I go to school and I feel so different from everyone. But then somebody would be talking about that new Aaliyah song or that Missy Elliott song or that new music video. And for those couple minutes, I could participate. And it's like nothing else matters, you know, because we're connected by the music. So, yeah.
I love that so much. I love that. And you're so right, because, you know, even growing up, my parents would take me to the Gurdwara and there'd be amazing kirtan happening and the music would be so amazing. And every morning my mom would listen to Shabats and there'd be music and music and music. And then you're so right. The second I'm like, I want to do music, my mom's like, what? What do you want to do? I'm like, what do you mean? Everything about our culture is so artistic and beautiful. And I think that connection is not made enough, that artists made that music and artists need to keep making that music. So definitely, I totally agree. Here's a question I'm really curious to know the answer to. So in the book, I think both Akash and Reenu, in their own way, they deal with shame and fear of judgment and what are people going to think, whether it's, like I said, Akash's sexuality or Reenu's love, her first love that she didn't actually marry, even though her husband just passed away. Do you think the world would judge Akash differently than Reenu?
Yeah.
Ooh, did I ask a question you've never been asked? I love.
No, I've never been asked that question, but that's a good question. Yeah, for a number of reasons. The generation, right? Our parents lived in a different generation where the expectations were different, you know, and you have to consider gender too. Women of a certain generation were not expected to do some of the things that Reenu is doing in this book. They were expected to be good wives and good mothers and good hostesses. They didn't get to like stoke the fire of their own passions, you know. They had to be a counterpart to someone else, to their husband, to their kids. So I do think Akash would be judged differently for those reasons, for the fact that he's a younger person and he's, you know, a man.
Yeah, and I love that you made the choices you made with Reenu, because so often we're used to seeing the perfect housewife, the Indian woman who did everything right, and it's not true to real life. You know, it's not true to people's real experiences. Women, even older women that are Indian, they have crushes, they have desires, they have all of these things, and we never are really shown that. Did you have any? I'm curious to know, was it always going to be mother and son, or was there ever a moment when you thought, oh, maybe it's the dad, something we're more used to seeing, a dad that's flawed? Was it always mother and son?
Yeah, I think it always was mother and son. And I think this is the part that's inspired by my life, which is that my father was just sort of this, like, I don't know, just he's just this big ball of love. And like all he ever wanted was for us to be happy. And it was like we could never get it right for him, but like that's all he wanted. And he used to say, he's like, I don't need anything in my life. Like I just want everyone to be happy. And my mom, you know, now that I'm older, I understand that there were things that she didn't want to do. I don't think she wanted to move to America. I don't think she wanted to leave London and leave everyone behind. And so I don't think for a part of her life she was happy. And sometimes she took that out on me. And then I internalized it and I took it out on her. And our relationship was always strained growing up. So I never questioned my father's love, but there were times when I did question my mother's love. And, you know, sometimes it's the parent that, you know, doesn't give you what you need that you're obsessed with. You know what I mean? Like, so I never even thought about my father. And maybe that's why in the book, the father isn't there physically.
Yeah, that's, we always want what we're not getting. We're always chasing the thing that we're not getting. Absolutely. In the book, you also, you know, you don't only describe the relationship between Akash and Renu through the blood relation, but there's a lot of like food, and there's the description of the home and his upbringing. And I love the world you created through the senses, honestly, music, food, everything. Was that your experience? Like, do you have memories solely associated with the food you ate during something?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like Friday nights was like lamb keema. I love keema. It's like my favorite.
That's apparent in the book. That is it should have been
Yeah.
called Tell Me How to Keema. Like literally.
Yeah, I just remember that you know, Friday nights my mom would make keema, and it was something I looked forward to. And it's all tied together. But you know, now that I think about it, I think one of the reasons why it was so special also is it represented the weekend. And I just I was so terrified in school all the time. I was bullied a lot, and like the only safe space was home. And so Friday, I could actually like exhale. And I knew that I had 2 days away from like this terrifying place that I didn't feel comfortable in. And so, yeah, it was all connected. I have memories of that. I have memories of the music, certain songs that would be on the radio when I had a crush on. You know, we all have that song that you associate with that person. And then unfortunately, you
Absolutely.
can't like, yeah, you can't forget it too. So it's like 20 years later, like you still think about that person when you hear that song. So yeah, those things are important, and they stay with us, and they kind of they sort of create the soundtrack, you know, to our lives. So
You know, so there's a character in the book whose name I shall not mention, but I will for the sake of this conversation, named Kareem. And he is the love interest of Renu, an old first love. You know, we hear her throughout the book talk about how much he means to her, how much she wished he had fought for her, how, you know, her first child was actually his child. All to this moment where we think they're gonna meet up after so many years. And if you haven't read the book, apologies for the spoiler alert, but get your priorities in check. He doesn't show up. And so we are devastated as readers because we're rooting for Renu and this love interest, and he doesn't show up. And I remember reading this in the book and wanting to set the world on fire because I was so upset that he didn't show up. Now I want to ask you, I feel like both Akash and Renu, in my opinion, when I read it, I was like, neither of them really got what they wanted. You know, Akash didn't get that childhood love, and Renu didn't get first her love. But in your opinion, do Renu and Akash have happy endings in your novel?
that's a good question. You know, when I was writing it, I was aware of the fact that these two characters, mother and son, ultimately had to come together in the end. And I think in order to do that, they had to not get what they thought they wanted. And it's interesting that you ask about happy endings, because I don't think either of them even needed a happy ending. I think they needed a new beginning. And, you know, Renu sort of idol, snap. You know, she considered Kareem this kind of idealistic what if situation. Like if my life had gone the way I wanted it to, I would have had it. If I had a choice, he was that choice that she never got to have. And so therefore she never got over it. And I realized that if he showed up, like what are we learning here? And what what happens then? The date could end up being awkward and then it's just disappointing. Or it could be great, and then what? She needed to come back into the fold of her family, and they all needed to come together and heal. And the only way for that to happen was for him to not show up. And in the end, we realized the greatest love story in this book is between mother and son. So.
Oh my God, that's beautiful. I'm still mad at Kareem, but it's beautiful. So yeah, I guess they did connect with each other, and you're right. If he was to show up, where would that leave us? Are we to believe that? Because there's a small detail that someone commented on a Lily's Library post saying when she goes to meet Kareem, she hears sirens. Should we believe he's dead? Is he like? Should I be happy and think he's dead, or is it doesn't matter?
So it's interesting, and I love that. I was reading the comments, and actually a few people were really being detectives, and they're like, well, there were these sirens. And, what's interesting is in an earlier draft, I put that there on purpose, thinking maybe he did die, and I would reveal that. And then I thought, wait a minute, Neel, you're doing too much. Like, how much can you put Rainu through? Like that, she already lost her husband. She has these issues with her sons. Like, you can't kill Kareem. Instead, you have to make her like hate him, and put him on block. So yeah, I think it's up to everyone's interpretation. I mean, if you really hate him that much, then you should believe that he died. I know that's what Cal Penn is hoping for.
Yes, absolutely. I would love to imagine, in fact, I imagine it daily, that he's crossing the street and I'm sorry to say this, he gets hit by several trucks and he's dead for breaking Renu's heart. That's what I would, although having said that, that means he was on his way to meet Renu, so I'm conflicted. You've said that Tell Me How to Be is the book you were always meant to write, but it's also the kind of literature we were always meant to read. And it's a crucial, empowering coming of age. What do you mean when you say that? It's the book we're always meant to read.
That's a good question. Did I say that?
You know what? If you didn't say it, we're going to edit this out. So don't worry about it. Someone give me that. So we're going to editors going to cut this part out.
I think I know I said the book I was always meant to write.
Oh, you're right. Okay, let me read it again. Let me read it again. Hold on. No, then ignore this question. I misunderstood. Editors, take this part out. Okay, perfect. So you know what I love most about this book is that you're writing something where, and this is why I started Lily's Library, actually. I learned that representation in books and literature is actually so much beyond what we see on screen. Actually, Hollywood has a lot of catching up to do when you compare what we see on screen compared to what we see in books. And I really learned that through starting Lily's Library. But this book is going to help so many people see themselves. I mean, I saw myself in the book. My mom saw herself in the book. It's going to see just so many people see themselves. But this wasn't always the case. When you were younger, when I was younger, we didn't have stories like this so readily available. And so I want to ask you, in the 80s and 90s, what resources could you turn to, if at all?
In terms of South Asian representation, there really wasn't anything. There was Bollywood, which was nice, and it was a nice escape, but it also felt so like different from my experience. And a lot of it is like love stories with unrealistic endings, but they're still great. So I look to like television shows. I loved The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I loved like seeing people of color in general on TV. But it wasn't until I guess college that I read a book by Jhumpa Lahiri, who is an amazing writer and a trailblazer. And she was the first person I read who was writing about life in America as a South Asian. And not only did I connect to it because I saw myself in the book, but it made writing seem possible because somebody was doing it, and doing it well. And that kind of changed everything. Yeah.
And so on that note, what can we expect next from you as a writer?
Well, I am developing Tell Me How to Be for TV at the moment.
That's exciting.
Working with some producers. Yeah, it's still in the very early stages, but I'm working with some producers and we have a whole plan for it. And who knows, maybe there'll be a role for you. We'll write a role.
Hit me. I can be the car that runs over Kareem.
Yes, I'm doing that, and I'm working on another book as well.
Amazing.
Which is, yeah, it's another kind of a homecoming story, but it's definitely very different. It's like darker and like very like sexy, and yeah.
I can't wait for the aunties to read that one. I can't wait to check it out for Lilly's library. My last question to you is, as not a writer, as someone who is a reader, a viewer, a listener, what kinds of stories are you excited to see South Asians, with respect to South Asians? What kind of stories? What do you think where do we need to go next? What do you want to see? What are you thirsty to see in terms of representation?
I'm excited to see South Asians centering themselves in stories without having to explain who we are. I think we have a journey, you know, we had to introduce ourselves. Hi, I'm a South Asian. This is what this means to me. This is what our culture is. These are the things we experience. Again, tell me how to be. One of the reasons I'm glad I wrote it is because now that I wrote it, I can move on and I can become creative. I'd love to see South Asians dabble in science fiction, in horror, in suspense, you know, and I think we just had to sort of make that introduction and, you know, and understand that like, there's room for all of our stories and there's room for all of us. You know, there isn't a single South Asian story. There's many.
Oh, wow. I love that you said that, because I think that is one of the hurdles of being a minority, is when you only have a handful of things to look to. People, understandably, they get upset because they're like, well, that's not my exact experience. And that's not, I mean, there's so many different cultures within India itself. So it's like, we need just more stories to cover all of these different types of people and different experiences. And I love that you also said without explanation, because I feel like, you know, growing up, I lived with my parents until I was 25. And when I write a script and I have a character like that, I'll have a bunch of execs not understand that decision. Why? I'm confused. Why would she? I'm like, I've watched movies and TV shows where people move out at 18 and live with their boyfriend, and I understood what was happening. So you can understand this. It's like, if you make the effort, you will understand. You know, so I love that you said that. Well, listen, do you want to say anything?
Oh, I was gonna say, so I heard this somewhere and I love it. You know, we say representation matters, which I love, but somebody said multiplicity in representation matters. And I love that, because it's not just sticking one person in a show, you know, and calling them Raj. It's having, having as many people as there are, you know, and as many stories as there can be told, so.
Absolutely. Well, I'm such a big fan of yours, Neel. Lilly Library, we're such a fan of you as well. We cannot wait to see what you do next. And I want to give a huge thank you to JFL for letting us have this conversation, because it's so important, and stories like this are so important as well. So for everyone watching, if you have not yet read this in its entirety, do it. Thanks, Neel.
Thank you. Thanks, Lilly. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Neel Patel and Lilly Singh, for that delightful conversation. Thank you all for watching and being such a great audience as always. Please stay logged on to continue to watch with us the series of exciting sessions featuring a stellar list of speakers that have been specially curated for you.